But then after these events that you see as only having negative outcomes occur, after they happen, you can oftentimes look back and be like, all right, well, that actually ended up being something that forced me to think about things in a completely different way, that challenged me and made me a lot better. And that's how I view that now. Like, without the finger thing happening, I definitely don't make the games in 2019 and probably don't end up figuring out the rest of my Army career as far as how related to fitness going forward without that. So I'm really lucky, I think, that it happened.
Welcome to the Spartan DEKA series on Spartan Up with Jarod Cogswell, Director of Sport, and Yancy Culp, Director of Programming.
What's up, Spartans? Welcome to the DEKA series on the Spartan Up podcast. I'm your co-host, Jarod Cogswell, along with my brother, Yancy Culp. And as usual, we've got a special guest today. I'm talking about Chandler Smith.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Honey Stinger and Climber Honey Stinger, made with organic honey and delicious ingredients. Use the code HSSpartan2020 at honeystinger.com to save 30% off. Climber, the most effective cardio and strength machine. Climber provides a full body strength and cardio workout with zero impact in only 30 minutes. Go to climber.com, that's CLMBR.com, and use the code Spartan.
But you know what I'm calling this guest? I'm calling him a global motivator. I'm talking about former collegiate wrestler at West Point, former U.S. Army captain, and 3 times CrossFit Games athlete, Chandler Smith. Chandler, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very impressed with every time I get to hear your voice. Like, when I checked this out before, I was like, that voice sounds like it was made for radio, as opposed to Yancy, whose face was made for radio. You have the voice that's made for radio.
That's how this works, man.
I'm happy to be here.
It's good to have you.
We got Chandler's hair glowing today. I love that. He's on fire. Listen, we are going to start off with what I call a mic drop.
Okay.
When I read this quote, it was a mic drop moment for me. So I'm going to read the quote. Your quote is saying, West Point presented the hardest road, the biggest challenge. We were highly involved at the time in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Army provided me the best opportunity for applied leadership. And I've got in bold here. As an aspiring leader, you want to place yourself at points of friction. I got chills when I read that last statement. That's not a typical high schooler mentality. When you're deciding where you're going to go to school, I want you to take us back to high school and that last statement that I read. As an aspiring leader, you want to place yourself at points of friction. Take us back to high school and your mindset at that point.
Okay, high school mindset, mostly centered around why I don't have friends and why I can't get people to go to school dances with me. But in between those thoughts, I think I was really fortunate to have a lot of really good mentorship. Specifically, I always point to, I started wrestling my freshman year of high school, and our assistant coach was a man named Nage Damas. He passed a few years back, but Coach Damas was a wrestler at West Point, team captain back in 1972, 1973. And our team captain at the time, Doug McFarland, was also heading to West Point. This was in 2010, 2011. And both those, I tried to quit the wrestling team after my season was over. I had like a pretty mediocre start and it was boring and I was getting beat up all the time. I wasn't having any fun. So I was like, I quit and I left. And both those 2 men in specific, like, made efforts to come back and get me and like made me feel wanted, made me like recognize me as part of the team. And having that initial moment, like, kind of made me, I was like, maybe there's something different about where these folks are coming from or where their morals are being developed. And so that phrase is obviously nothing that I came up with. I'm not clever enough to say that point of friction is something that is said pretty frequently within the Army, that like that's what leaders do. For example, if you're in an infantry unit and you're conducting an assault on the objective, you always are with the maneuvering element because that's where there's the greatest chance of things to go wrong, and you need to be able to direct things where the action is the hairiest, right? So that's kind of like an Armyism, but it's something that was told to me at that time. And I was thinking, like, if I've been placed in a position where I have been given maybe some above average physical skills. And then also I had access to a great education. I went to Rockhurst High School, as a Jesuit all boys Catholic school in Kansas City, Missouri. Had access to a good education, access to some like high level physical skills, and good training. And as far as like my dad and the people that I grew up being around, like I wanted to use those skills for others. And that's kind of what our high school's motto was, AMDG, ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam, which is for the greater glory. And it's a very service. The Jesuits in general are focused on service, and so that whole kind of attitude pervaded everything I was doing at the time. That was like all that was taught to me. Also, I messed up the AMDG thing. It's not for the greater glory. I messed up the exact Latin. But like that was kind of my mindset at the time, and being that West Point was the place where I could most easily make the translation into understanding how the lessons I'd learned service-wise could go to helping as many people as possible. I saw that as the logical next step. So that's what I did.
Yeah, I like that. Chandler, I never wrestled in high school or in my youth, and I've always had friends and buddies that wrestled, and they've always seemed to be good, solid, disciplined guys, crazy guys sometimes. And they like to have a good time, but at the same time, I just feel like, sports in general teaches you so much about life. But, wrestling, I think is just it's almost a different type of sport, like I was telling Yancy this, every year, I love watching the NCAA tournament. Even though I never wrestled, I just love seeing those guys get after it. That tournament is just phenomenal, and they say that's the real March Madness, right? And, yes, but I do think that wrestling is one of those sports that definitely teaches you something about life. What would you say wrestling taught you?
Oh, I frequently say like any good traits I have, I learned from wrestling. So I take blame for all the bad ones, and then my parents and wrestling taught me all the good ones. I would say from a sports perspective, I think the answer to that question is probably multi-pronged. From a sports perspective, taught me how to like suffer. I think more than any other sport, there's a lot of prolonged discomfort because it doesn't end just within training. Specifically, the experience of cutting weight is one that turns your whole life into preparation for or recovery for like your next event. And that's what being a professional athlete is. But I think at the amateur level, it's kind of unique. You finish an event, you'll see wrestlers finish a match and they'll go and run sprints after because they got to get their weight down for the next match or the next tournament, or you're not eating any food, so then it's affecting your studies and it's affecting your ability to maintain relationships. It becomes a very holistic thing, like this pursuit of making weight. And so I learned how to kind of really sit in that zone. And I think as far as lessons that apply outside of wrestling was like the lesson of delayed gratification, because the sport is super technical, and coming into it a little bit later than most, there's a high learning curve, and I definitely struggled initially. My freshman and sophomore years of high school, I didn't qualify for state. I spot started my sophomore year and got beat up more times than I didn't. And then you get a little bit better and you make the next jump to college and you get beat up again and you got to start all over again. But there's an understanding that if you are putting in the time to build, it's kind of like base building season within endurance sports. If you're putting in the time to develop yourself long term, even though you might not be able to see that there is going to be a way for you to succeed later on, like the only way that there's even a chance is by going through these really long and awful periods of just getting beat up. And I think that's sometimes how life is. You can't always directly see the end results of the work that you're putting in, but if you go in expecting it to be awful and maybe understanding that you don't know when the success is going to show, then you're going to be able to make it through day by day versus getting disappointed if you're like, I would expect to be successful in 6 weeks, and 6 weeks comes and you maybe haven't hit the goals that you wanted to. So yeah, suffering and delayed gratification.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of wrestling coaches and wrestlers listening to this. The whole time they'll just be going fist bump. Yeah, exactly what he said. You mentioned, I love how you mentioned mom and dad in wrestling are reason all the good things in my life I was taught by them. Your dad, Cedric, I loved doing research on him, by the way. I'll be honest, I did not realize he spent, his time with the Florida Gators backfield with Emmitt Smith. That was an amazing Smith tandem. Are you freaking kidding me? Went on to 6 years in the NFL, and ever since has been a strength coach in the NFL. Talk to us a little more about your dad's influence when you were very young, and then throughout childhood leading in to high school. And also, I can't help but think that I'm sure he played a role. Not every CrossFitter has a dad that's a strength coach. Talk through us about his influence on you from when you're little bitty Chandler to now.
So again, that's like a multi-pronged answer. I think I was very lucky to come up around professional sports because I think I got to understand very early on, like how comprehensive of a lifestyle it was, or it took to be a successful pro athlete. I remember being a ball boy for the Denver Broncos in the mid 2000s, and Jerry Rice came one year. He ended up deciding not to play, but he came and he spent training camp with us that year and talking like, it's one of the most dedicated athletes, one of the best NFL, like top 5 easy, NFL player of all time. And when you watch the dedication he puts towards practice, like getting warmed up for practice, the intentionality with which everything is going on during practice, and then the recovery, like all of that, as far as being like a consummate professional, he set the example. But even then there's guys that, folks maybe never heard of. I think a guy named Kyle Johnson, who was a fullback for those Broncos teams, and how serious he was about his trainer, Ebenezer Ekubom, another name that people don't know, but like Eb would train after practice, and like just the dedication these guys put towards not just the training but the recovery, like that taught me pretty early on like how serious things could be taken, and how much more of it was going to happen outside of just like the practice times, right? Your allotted practice time, and especially as a younger athlete, that you can view that as the only time you have to get better, or you can start to explore that there's elements that you could be working on with your sleep and with your nutrition. That's we talk about that a lot here, place that I'm at now. But I got introduced to that lifestyle, not only from my dad when he was playing, but from the athletes that was lucky enough to grow up around. And then also I think I got a very good introduction to strength training. It's not something I get to talk about too much now, because I think more than anything in the CrossFit space, my lifting, especially technically, is like a meme more than it is something that's taken seriously. But I was able to get a good introduction, at least for like compound lifts. I'm very confident in my ability to perform deadlifts and benching and squatting, because I've had a lot of exposure to those movements over the last decade and a half. I was introduced to them smartly, and also was able to learn like some pretty basic programming stuff from an early age. And when you have an idea of progressions and overload and stuff, it makes those early years it's pretty easily when you're first starting off. But I think it made my gains during those early times a little bit advanced, and that's definitely set the stage for me to be able to continuously work to try and learn more about the conditioning side of the house. So I feel decently confident in my ability to understand strength and how to get strong. But your all's world and everything that comes with that is super fascinating to me. I was on the phone with Hunter yesterday talking some conditioning stuff. Like there's so much about that I don't know. And I think there's a huge crossover. I believe CrossFit's an endurance sport. So the more I can learn about endurance from experts like you all and everyone in the space that you guys are in, like the better that'll make me at CrossFit, but it'll also make me a better informed individual that's able to help teach that the next generation of folks who wants to learn how to be strong and fast, like and have something to give to them in either one of those arenas. So yeah, he set me off on a good start as far as getting strength knowledge and also understanding how to be a pro athlete, and I've hopefully been able to build on that a little bit since then.
Awesome. When you were young, Chandler, being around, your dad and all of these, professional football players, Jerry Rice, obviously one of the best of all time. Did you ever feel like this pressure that, okay, I gotta live up to my dad's standards and where he was?
Oh, absolutely. I think out of that ball boy group, it was a point of consternation for a while. So my dad played, and we have a couple of relatives who also played, pro football or high level football, like in college and everything. And I remember family members would ask me what I was doing at college. I was like, oh, I'm wrestling at West Point. They're like, oh, it's not football. Like, that's not very cool. But most of those ball boys went on to play Division I college football. And there's I think 3 or 4 of them who are coaches in the NFL now. So like, it's kind of a family business type thing. And for a good long while, as in like probably today still, I feel like I was like, I didn't do a good enough job. I didn't make it in the right area, but my dad has a good amount of respect for the stuff that I do. And, as you get older, you also are less maybe invested in your what other folks think. Like, my route's different, and that's okay. My kids are going to have a different route than me, and that's great too. So, everybody's got their own thing, and I'm happy I was able to find my own niche a little bit. But I definitely, for a long time, you might remember that there's a song, the 1995 Skilo song, I Wish, where he says, wish I was a little bit taller, I wish I was a baller. That was my life for a long time. I was like, dang, I wish I could have played football, and I'm stuck wrestling, but it worked out.
Love it.
I like
Love
that
it.
story.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Honey Stinger and Climber. Climber is a vertical climbing, full-body workout that combines high-intensity cardio with resistance training. It's one of the most efficient workouts on the market. With zero impact, the machine is safe for almost any age or level of ability. It's the first vertical climber to feature a large format touch display with on-demand instructor-led classes. Climber's patent-pending design has a high-quality build and a low level of required maintenance. It's easy to move, making it perfect for commercial or at-home use. The open design allows the user, you, to maintain correct body position without having to be inches away from the monitor. Climber just might be the better home workout you're looking for. Climber provides a full-body strength and cardio workout with zero impact in only 30 minutes. Go to climber.com, that's CLMBR.com, and use the code SPARTAN to save $250. Honey Stinger is made with organic honey and delicious ingredients. Honey Stinger's waffles, energy chews, gels, and bars give you the fuel you need to push harder, go further, do all the things that we do as Spartans. For training and racing, you need convenient nutrition that tastes great and works. Honey Stinger is Spartan's official on-course nutrition. It's made with real honey. Honey Stinger started with a simple plan: wholesome ingredients, great taste, and, of course, honey. Why does Honey Stinger use honey? Using an ingredient engineered by nature, not in a laboratory, it has its benefits. In fact, the less you mess with Mother Nature, the better. That's why they're committed to the True Source Honey Pledge. And they've got a special code just for our audience. You can save 30% with the code HSSpartan2020. That's HSSpartan2020 at honeystinger.com to save 30% off, just for our Spartan Up podcast listeners.
February 2016, the day before the CrossFit Open. Military exercise you're involved in. You destroy your finger, break it in several places, lose half the dang finger. Walk us. I've never really known exactly what happened. You briefly told me about the story where we were in Tahoe when you came out for the face-off CrossFit versus Spartan Games, which was awesome. Tell us about that day and how and everything that kind of led to you coming, training after that and getting back involved in CrossFit after the finger injury.
All right, so it's February 2017. We got young First Lieutenant Smith I'm running a tank platoon, figuring things out a little bit. I'm lucky I have a good commander and good platoon sergeant at the time, and there was word, I think Captain LaPlante, my boss at the time, told me that like my soldiers had knocked off one of the pieces of side armor on the tanks. And if you haven't seen a tank, they're really big, and side armor is really thick and really heavy. So when the guys knocked this down, it was a big deal because it was going to take a lot of work to get it moved out of the way. It's not like you could just like push it to the side. And then it kind of happened like a choke point, as in there was a lot of vehicles behind our tanks that were waiting to get through the area, and we needed to get this moved. But since the vehicles that normally helped us move those things were also behind it, it was like a unique problem set. So we were instructed to go pick it up like with soldier power. And in the process of doing that, as we picked it up, part of it moved up. And then so we set it back down to figure out how we were going to move it. And in the process of setting it back down, we set it back down on my finger. Or maybe I was trying, the soldiers say that I was trying to deadlift it And I was like, that's not the case. Because one, I'm not that silly, but two, I'm definitely super strong and I would have been able to, I'm just kidding. So that was a running joke for a while, but yeah, that happened February 2017. I'd actually tested out the workout the night of the announcement, which was 17.1s, a bunch of dumbbell snatches and burpees. And there was a lot of like movement inefficiencies because the rules were not super known at that point in time. And I ended up with a horrible score. And that was my only workout that I had for months. And it drove me bananas because I was like, gosh, I stink. Everybody's going faster than me on it. But that's just a point of, personal sadness. Anyways, so that happened. And we were getting ready. We were training up for what's called the National Training Center, NTC. And it's this desert out in the middle of nowhere, California. No offense. If you live in Barstow or Victorville, California, I'm sure you're great people, but it's out in the desert out there. And we were training up to go to that event for, I think it's like 3 weeks long or something. So that way we could go to our rotational deployment to Eastern Europe later on that year. So I was already going to have a tough time kind of fitting in all the training that I needed to or wanted to get done for fitness stuff because Army training was picking up at the time. And after that happened, I also broke like the concussive shock, like broke some of the bones in here, and it was a whole mess. So I was like, all right, well, I'm pretty sure my career's done. That stinks. Like I was really sad, very just bummed out and unfocused, but I was like, at least I have an actual career. So I lucked out and was able to move into a different unit, got another great boss in Captain McFadden, and kind of was able to refocus on the Army side of the house, but didn't really kind of took my mind off training for 5 or 6 months because it was you don't want to watch everybody doing the events that you want to participate in and be able to that you think you'd be able to be competitive in. So after I missed the Open, I didn't really watch regionals, although I did go and train with the Smith brothers out in Virginia, and that kind of helped get my mind right a little bit. And I started also learning about the endurance side of the house because that was something I could do. I couldn't do a whole lot of CrossFit because couldn't use my hands and like the grip stuff wasn't really happening. But I got into the endurance side and then kind of came up with the plan of things that I wanted to do when we were in Europe to get myself in good enough shape to be able to capitalize on training whenever we got back. And it actually ended up being a really good thing for me. So a guy, Mike Irwin, who runs Team Run Right Blue, always references things like post-traumatic growth. And it's kind of something you can't see in the moment. But then after these events that you see as only having negative outcomes occur, after they happen, you can oftentimes look back and you're like, all right, well, that actually ended up being something that forced me to think about things in a completely different way that challenged me and made me a lot better. And that's how I view that now. Like without the finger thing happening, I definitely don't make the games in 2019 and probably don't end up figuring out the rest of my Army career as far as how it related to fitness going forward without that. So I'm really lucky, I think, that it happened, and especially lucky that it only took out the tip of the finger. I don't know how that works. If I get to heaven and can instant replay that, I would love to see how it missed my middle and pinky finger because it doesn't make any sense. But don't look a gift horse in the mouth.
Yeah. I was curious, Chandler. You are. I described you as the global motivator. We see you on Instagram, for example, and I think there's a lot of people that look up to you. They appreciate your story and your journey to where we are today. What inspires you at where you are in your career and where you are in your life? What inspires you? Because you have accomplished a lot, but what's next? Where do you want to go, and what's keeping you driving forward?
That's a really good question. I think my answer for this is actually a bit out of the ordinary because whenever I talk with other folks, I think the majority of athletes are like pretty internally driven. I feel like I'm more externally driven because I'm really fortunate. I mentioned earlier, right? Like between my parents and wrestling, like I've had a lot of people and groups and organizations, I guess, that I recognize poured a lot of time and energy into helping make me not a total scumbag. And so I always feel like I'm representing those groups when I'm going out. And I also recognize that for some of those groups, some of those demographics, specifically within CrossFit, I might be like the only person that gets a chance to represent. for the whatever groups those are. So that's something I feel like I wear pretty heavily, like knowing that if I'm not at the games right now, then there's maybe not another soldier, or there's maybe not another veteran, or there's maybe not another African American, there's maybe not another wrestler, so on and so forth. And because of how much I respect those groups and the people within those groups, like that's kind of the thing that makes me motivated to go get after it, and not just like with training, but also when it comes to representing, because there could be that young man or woman in one of those groups who sees me and then is thus motivated to go, and the second and third order effects of that change could end up affecting tens or hundreds or however many lives down the road. So recognizing I have an opportunity to maybe be an outsized voice of representation to groups that would otherwise be underrepresented, and that I might be the only person who's able to do that at the current moment. That's what keeps me going. And even if there was 5 other people who met all those demographic specificities, like I feel like I'd probably still be pretty motivated, because I really just have always felt like the role of an athlete, at least for better or for worse, we get the chance to be role models. We get a lot of eyes on us. So it's something that you should take very seriously, and that you should perform like honorably and to a high level. So that's kind of how I view it. As long as I'm in the space to be good enough to be competitive, I have the chance to represent and maybe be a good example for someone. And whether if that's how I treat people around me, if that's how I train, whatever it is, there's a chance, like all parts of your life are kind of being looked at, especially in this age of social media where people can see a lot of your day to day. So I just kind of try to think about that as I'm going through all parts, knowing that there could be somebody who's watching, and if I do the right thing, then I might help that person set the right example for people down the road.
All right, Yancy, I'm going on the record here. I'm gonna say my favorite CrossFitter is on this podcast right now. I love that answer, Chandler. I can feel your authenticity, your sincerity. We talk about this, in the outdoor adventure world. Humility is so important, and you come across that way, and man, we need more Chandler Smiths in the world. That's for dang sure.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chandler. I think you're getting ready to say something.
I was going to say, I always feel like it's very easy to be humble in the CrossFit space, because more than any other like sport, right? We do so many things pretty well. But I know that if you ask me to run with Atkins, right, like I can't keep up with him for more than 200 meters. Or if you ask me to lift with any of the Olympic weightlifters that are out there, like you're constantly being exposed to things that you're actually not that great at. And wrestling is also pretty similar. There's always you're never on top for very long. That's another thing too that I think I learned coming up. Like the life of a pro athlete is like a transient one. No one stays on top forever. So anyone who ever has like a really outsized sense of confidence, I think is living. They're deluded, because it's going to go away at some point. There's going to be someone younger, hungrier, better, whatever than you. So like recognize that you have a lot of skills, but you also are not perfect, not complete. And I think I'm just consistently humbled, because there's a lot of really good athletes and good people around that keep me that way. So that's another reason to be happy that I'm doing CrossFit, because it's this unique opportunity to just be exposed to a lot of weaknesses all the time.
Well, I know it's really easy for people to practice and script out the perfect answer that could kind of sound something like the answer you gave. I got to hang out with you for 3 days. I when you were saying it, I kept wanting to say, I wanted to hit the pause button and say, listen, you listeners and viewers, this is authentic. He means what he's saying. And I know you're feeling the same thing, Jarod. That's what I felt when I hung out with Chandler for 3 days. Okay, Spartans, thank you for tuning in to episode 1 with our rock star guest, Chandler Smith, 3-time CrossFit Games athlete, former Army captain, 4-year wrestler at West Point. It was a great episode, but let me tell you something. Episode 2 is going to be amazing, and I'm going to give you one of his mic drops right now, where Chandler talks about, as a great leader, you can never have a bad day. Check out episode 2. Rock and roll.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the DEKA series on Spartan Up podcast. Spartan Up is your partner in resilience for mind, body, and spirit. We're here 3 days every week. Tuesdays, you can find Joe DeSena, founder and CEO of Spartan, interviewing biohackers, business leaders, authors, and athletes. Thursdays and Saturdays, catch episodes from our DEKA, Endurance, Trail, Combat, and La Ruta series. Do you know someone who needs a little nudge? Maybe they could use some motivation, tactics to be stronger, healthier, happier, more successful. Tell them about our show. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. We want to know who's watching and who's listening. Thanks. See you next time. This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Honey Stinger and Climber Honey Stinger, made with organic honey and delicious ingredients. Use the code HSSpartan2020 at honeystinger.com to save 30% off. Climber, the most effective cardio and strength machine. Climber provides a full-body strength and cardio workout with zero impact in only 30 minutes. Go to climber.com, that's CLMBR.com, and use the code SPARTAN.